Tariffs. Super cool tariffs. Tremendous tariffs. The reciprocal tariff rake. The tariffs. April 4th, Liberation Day. President Donald Trump unveils his giant tariff sport, and just like that, the global economy flips. Tariffs are back. They're the hottest topic in every negotiation room. Everyone's scrambling for a deal. More than one trade that we have together. Tariffs are supposed to protect the economy, but what if they do the opposite? The value of the US dollar is falling. The government is raking in record revenue. Unemployment is going up. So what's really going on? Let's first explain how tariffs work and what they are supposed to do. When companies import goods, they send money abroad in exchange for products made abroad. To protect local jobs, governments sometimes place tariffs or taxes on imported goods. Imports more expensive. With fewer imports, local businesses face less competition. In theory, this should boost local production and keep more money in the country. The idea. Tariffs mean fewer imports and a stronger local economy. But in practice, things look different. Imports continue to flow in, and the value of the US dollar has kept falling against almost every other currency. The US dollar index started 2025 had 129 points and fell to 120 by June. In 2020-4 the value had increased, while 2023 remained relatively stable. The drop in 2025 is the steepest first-half drop since the early 1970s. So how did this happen? At the first glance, tariffs should strengthen the currency, and the simple reason is if you do that from a starting point, that should create an excess demand for your products, right? We've seen, instead, the dollar depreciating. What can explain that? I think the number one explanation is definitely a loss of confidence in U.S. economic policy. A depreciation is basically a way to put all U.S. assets on sale at once, right? By making them cheaper in foreign currency terms. The reason that assets need to go on sale is because people are less excited about buying U.S. financial assets in this environment. Tariffs are also supposed to promote local business growth if there are fewer imports. But the U.S. is still heavily importing goods. In 2020-4, tariffs brought the U.S. nearly $50 billion in revenue in the first half of the year. In 2025, the number doubled to $100 billion. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, "The number is expected to exceed $300 billion by the end of 2025. So are only Americans benefiting? No, I would say quite to the contrary. We're the ones who are suffering from this trade war. It's true, as you point out, that you get some revenue, but it's a huge tax increase. You get revenue from any tax increase, and usually presidents don't go on the news and say, hey, I raised your tax a bunch. We should all be really happy, but this is exact. What's happening now is consumers and U.S. businesses are paying this tax increase. Job creation has also gone off the rails. Trump's tariffs were marketed as job protecting, even job creating, until recently this seemed accurate. In May, 144,000 jobs were added, followed by 147,000 in June. But then the July report came out. Not only were there just 7,000 to 3,000 jobs created, far below the forecasted 115,000, but the previous figures were also sharply revised. June was cut to just 14,000 and May to 19,000. What might this tell us about the true effects of tariffs? What we're seeing in the data is a failure of the Trump tariff policies. These weak job numbers are unsurprising because the tariffs introduce a large shock to the U.S. economy. It's like a big tax on consumers because the things they're buying at the store are more expensive, but it's also a tax on businesses. A majority of our imports are intermediate goods. So when you put huge taxes on those intermediate goods, you make U.S. businesses less competitive relative to their peers abroad. Can hurt job creation and economic growth. This is not the first time that tariffs have not worked as expected. In the 1980s, sugar tariffs made imported sugar expensive. Prices spiked and Coca-Cola had to switch to high fructose corn syrup to cut costs. Imports were severely affecting our industry. In 2002, George W. Bush imposed steel tariffs to protect American producers, but it backfired. Industries dependent on steel like auto and construction shed jobs and saw lower profits. In his first administration, Donald Trump launched a trade war with tariffs on Chinese goods. If they charge us, we charge them the same thing. China hit back, costs went up, U.S. exports slowed down. So how is it any different now? So the situation is far worse now than it was. Then what we're doing now is we're raising tariffs to on average about 19% for all the trade, right? And if you look at U.S. trade in recent years, it's been over $3 trillion. If you look at trade with China, that's a big chunk of that, but it's still only about $400 billion or something in that neighborhood. So we're talking about a much larger quantity of trade that you're a similarly high tariff on, so consumers will take a hit. Instead of $500 of extra, prices looking more like $2, $500, and that's a much worse hit for consumers, and it's a much bigger shock for producers that will be paying more for inputs regardless of where they source in the world. It's easy to look at short-term numbers and call it a win, but the economy isn't that simple. Tariffs don't act alone. There are different variables, ripple effects, and consequences. The damage may not be obvious yet, but it is there and it is growing.